hearing. This is coming from the site Justia, which I find to be pretty accurate. It usually comes up without too much mess and puts out some pretty detailed, clean legislation without jumbling it up. Just kind of keeps it right to the point. Today we're going to be reading from the 2006 Louisiana Law Session from Revised Statute 14403.2, which is titled Abuse and Neglect of Adults, Reports, Investigation, Waiver of Privilege, Penalties, Immunity. Now this is a very, very important piece of legislation that is, like many, extremely difficult to get the parties that clearly have the obligation to do or to perform the duties the legislation indicates so clearly. But it's just dicey, just in real life. If protective services come, they go out and they do their investigation, and they tend to just kind of talk to the people that are usually the people that are putting the person in a hostile, toxic situation, and they just say, no, everything's fine, and then they leave. Or they don't know actually what their job is. I've studied it immensely, and I've been in parts of my life where the social protective services were called on me because everything had been stolen. And I'm just living on the floor. People saw, and I wanted them to report it. And of course I said, look, you can take this right up straight to the DA, and if you want, you can take it here, and then blah, blah, blah. I had like the book in front of me. It was a little polished up, but I said, you have the power to get this into a, immediate injunctive hearing and get relief. And I no, we don't. And I was like, well, yeah, you do. That's precisely what your job title is to do. She didn't even know, so that's not good. It's something that needs to be worked on. But so all those people will know out there that are powers of attorney and dealing with other people and their money, and you're talking to their moms or their dads or their friends, and you're not talking to the actual disabled person or the elder person. That is a malpractice trap, and it should be common sense if you remember some of the stuff early in law school, which if you're going to be managing any type of money, you need to remember the first stuff from law school and then go beyond that. But basically, we're dealing with fiduciary duties and what they are. This is a trap. It's also primarily responsible for lay persons that are trying to manage money for somebody else, and they're not a lawyer, and they don't have even half of a clue of what all is involved in it. And most of the lawyers that I've come across are just flat out will take the money. The elder money scam, disabled money scam, what are they going to do? So we're going to just do like I do, and we're just going to go right to the law, Ryan's law. I talk about the law and read the law, and if it is the law, it's the law. If it's not, it's not. It doesn't need to be so confusing. Okay, so this starts off with 4032, which just says, abuse and neglect of adults, reports, investigation, waiver of privilege, penalties, immunity. A little foreshadowing, I guess. A1. Okay, now we're starting to get into it immediately. The purpose of this section is to protect adults who cannot physically or mentally protect themselves and who are harmed or threatened with harm through action or inaction by themselves or by the individuals responsible for their care or by another party. Now, primary things to look at in that sentence are going to be harm by action or inaction. and I have more instances of trying to get the severity of an inaction being the same as an action, not just here but in law, to younger lawyers that are more lay people. When you're just trying to talk to them, people tend to think, even lawyers, that if you're just sitting in the weeds, as I call it, you're fine. No, not if you have some type of a duty, a duty that is action based, for lack of a better term. You have to do something. You know something. You have to come forward, or whatever it is. Maybe it's something to just do with the party in which you have the trouble right now. But there's affirmative duty. Affirmative duty. If the law that we're reading here, or any law legislates via voters through, you voted on it, and there it is. You got to follow it. You did it. I don't vote, so I didn't, but you voted. So this is your stuff that I pursue. So thank yourself. So that's what our law is, what you voted in. And it's pretty black and white, most of it, but as anything, power and stuff comes into the game. But I'm steadfastly going to try to change it to make it always equal. So the thing to look at is action or inaction. So both. Doing nothing, you can lose. Doing something, you can lose. They're the same. Now, here's the other thing. It requires mandatory reporting. Now, when they go and vote in these things, they have a good time, whatever, but they do choose their words. They're not the smartest people in the world, but they're not the dumbest people in the world either. They're educated people, and they know when they choose the word mandatory. They're not choosing may, might, can. Mandatory reporting of suspected cases. So it just has to be a case that you suspect of abuse or neglect by any person having reasonable cause to believe that such a case exists. So if you have a suspected case, any person that reasonably believes that there may be a case has a mandatory duty to report it. It is intended that as a result of such reports, protective services shall be provided by the Adult Protection Agency. Such services shall be available as needed without regard to income. Number 2, it is further the intent of the legislature to authorize only the last possible restriction on the exercise of personal and civil rights consistent with the person's need for services, and to require that due process be followed in imposing such restrictions. This is good to just, in general terms, be sure that due process is being followed to make these restrictions and things that they are imposing upon them, to be sure that they have their due chance to go in and receive them. It's a minor little issue there, but like I said, it's a pretty simple thing here. Part B, for purposes of this section, now this is where we're in the meat of it. The following definitions will apply. I had more luck in my time as a contract lawyer in the definition section than anywhere else, because there are terms of art in the contract if they're in the definition section, and you can usually intuitively know what the several definitions are going to be, but you need to read them. And in this case, it's the most important part. So it says, for purposes of this section, the following definitions shall apply. Number 1, abandonment. It is the desertion or willing forsaking of an adult by anyone having care or custody of the person under circumstances in which a reasonable person would continue to provide care or custody. Desertion or willful forsaking of an adult by anyone having care or custody of a person, care or custody. not custody. Care or custody. So it's either or. So care. So if you're caring for someone, then you have to reasonably it has to be reasonable to stop caring for them, or you're breaking the law. So people go, well, I can stop now. No, you can't, because you can see that person would have gone on to do something else. They're now relying on you. It's a nice responsibility, but it is a responsibility. So you just use reason there, and you continue to provide care. You know, you don't take care of someone and they're having a heart attack, and you go, well, that's just too much. Okay, and then number 2, abuse. Abuse is the infliction of physical or mental injury on an adult by other parties, including but not limited to such means as sexual abuse, abandonment, isolation, exploitation, or extortion of funds or other things of value to such an extent that their health, self-determination, so their health, their self-determination, or their emotional well-being is in danger. So clearly those can come as a 3-pack. Mental wellness, self-determination, and emotional well-being being in danger. Isolation and all of that is proven long ago very easily. It's not only illegal, but it is one of the worst things on mental well-being, because you just are being alone for a long period of time is just not good. It's not good. That's why those are prisons, which is where you'll land if you don't report people who are doing this, or might be doing it, maybe doing it. Okay, an adult is any person 60 years or older, any disabled person 18 years or older, or an unemancipated minor. Adult Protection Agency is the Office of the Elderly Affairs and the Office of the Governor. Any individual 60 years of age older in need of adult protective services as provided in this section. Adult Protection Agency is the Department of Health and Hospitals for any individual between the ages of 18 and 59 and in need of adult protective services. The Secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals may assign the duties and powers provided to this section to any office in the department of the provision of adult protective services as provided in subsection E1. Number 4. Number 4 is a doozy. This is one where a strong voice or presence in a family or in a situation can just talk it into existence, and or someone with an injury that is just weaker can be just taken advantage of over and over. And then you get the bad tipping point where it tips to where then everyone just does. It is capacity to consent. Nothing is worse than listening to people that do not know what the law is discuss around you. Capacity, and whether or not somebody has capacity or not. I mean, I don't tell them how to make the cheeseburgers, That was a joke. Capacity consent means the ability to understand and appreciate the nature and consequences of making decisions concerning one's own person. Their person. Do they understand the decisions they're making for them? Including but not limited to provisions for health, mental health care, food, shelter, clothes, safety, financial affairs. This determination may be made on assessment or investigative findings, observation, or medical or mental evaluation. Caregiver. Biggie. Caregiver is any person or persons, either temporarily or permanently responsible for the care of an aged person or a person or mentally disabled adult. Caregiver includes, but is not limited to, adult children, parents, relatives, neighbors, daycare personnel, adult foster home sponsors, personnel of public and private institutions and facilities, adult congregate living facilities, and nursing homes which have voluntarily assumed the care of the aged person or disabled adult, have assumed voluntary residence with the aged person or disabled adult, or have assumed voluntary use or tutelage of the aged disabled person's assets. Obtain the aged person's assets or disabled person's assets, funds, or property, and specifically shall include city, parish, or state law enforcement agencies. Disabled person is defined: a person with a mental, physical, or developmental disability that substantially impairs the person's ability to provide adequately for their own care or protection. You see, that doesn't mean that they don't have capacity. Stephen Hawking likely would have difficulty protecting himself and surviving himself from his wheelchair, and he can't move. But he's the smartest man in the world. So I wouldn't try to, when he says, let's go to the Bank of America, I'm going to 90th floor to talk to the CEO, say, no, you should just go to Regions and get a starter account. No, you don't even, you just drive his ass there. Well, anyone in his condition has that same exact right. Unless you have a court order from in court where a judge said that somebody cannot make their decisions, and you were in court and you have a copy of it, they get to make all the decisions with the money in the end, and they can have it all now if they want. Fact, you're breaking the law if you're even remotely getting some kickback for something or blending into anything at all. You're breaking the law badly, especially with a disabled. You're talking about ADA law, and you're talking about fiduciary responsibility. Now, if you're not giving them the money at all, you're in bad trouble already. There's basically no way out of it. I would just give them the money now and try to make up. They can't take care of themselves physically and mentally. Caregiver includes but not limited to, okay, we read that. They've assumed the tutelage. The disabled person, that's what I was talking about. The disabled person has substantially impaired their ability to provide for their own care and protection. Now, 6, exploitation. That's a fun one. Exploitation is the illegal or improper use or management of an aged person or disabled person's funds. Interesting. Or assets or property. Or the use of an aged person's or disabled person's power of attorney or guardianship for one's own profit or advantage. Exploitation. The illegal or improper use or management of an aged person or disabled person's funds. I would say that keeping the funds and not allowing them to have any of them ever is exploitation. Turn the page. Extortion is the acquisition of a thing of value from an unwilling or reluctant adult by physical force, intimidation, or the use of legal official authority. Intimidation. Disabled people and elders are intimidated beyond belief. They rely on people for a ride. They rely on everything. They just are fearful all the time. Slight intimidation, and they hand over money. That's extortion. You may not have known it was extortion, but you didn't know what extortion meant anyway. You knew you shouldn't have done it. Isolation. What is isolation? Isolation includes intentional acts committed for the purpose of preventing, and which do serve to prevent, an adult from having contact with family, friends, or concerned persons. This shall not be construed to affect a legal restraining order. Number Number 2, intentional acts committed to prevent an adult from receiving his mail or telephone. Number C, intentional acts of physical or chemical restraint of an adult committed for the purpose of preventing contact with visitors, family, friends, or other concerned persons. D, intentional acts which restrict, place, or confine an adult in a restricted area for the purposes of social deprivation or preventing contact with family, friends, visitors, or other concerned persons. However, medical isolation prescribed by a licensed physician caring for the adult shall not be included. Neglect. Neglect is the failure by a caregiver responsible for an adult's care or by other parties to provide the proper necessary support or medical, surgical, or any other necessary for their well-being. No adult who is being provided treatment in accordance with a recognized religious method of healing in lieu of medical treatment shall for that reason alone be considered to be neglected or abused. The next part's about the investigation process and all, and basically you just go to your Adult Protective Service and your police. It's longer, and I don't even like to read it because it makes me mad because they don't follow it. But you need to immediately cover your ass, if for no other reason than that. Just cover your ass and call and get a report and get a copy of it that shows that you did this, because this is the kind of thing that they don't follow that much. But if they did, they're just looking for the fastest way to get anyone on the hook, and everyone's going to point fingers, and all of a sudden you don't even know what's going on. So you just do it. You just go turn them in. If you don't, it's your own fault if you get caught, because if you had somebody read it to you, you do it. And it's going to help. It's going to help them out too. So lawyers, be watchful for that, for a malpractice trap, but also criminal, and everybody else. Just remember, think of it this way. If you pick a guy up off the side of the road in L.A. and he's like, just in bad shape, it looks like he'll be better. He's just hungry and tired out and dried out, and you are driving home to New York. Well, you can't get almost to New York and then throw him out of the road and then say, well, we just paid $1,000 for you to get better and drive this far. We're going to leave you here. No, once you've attached yourself to that person, it's your person until you unattach them somewhere. But during the interim, you can't just isolate them and things like that. You have to get them into the safetiness of society, get them out and around, not secluded. All of that is illegal. So just be nice and follow rules and do what you think's right, and you'll be okay in the law or other. This is the Rhino Room. I'll be charging it next week.